So today I've taken some time to record a series of videos that I've spliced together here and I'm publishing to share. These are just some light recording from the streets live from public transit about what I call the 5 categories of public transit riderships. Ridership 1, the non-riders, 2, the skeptics, 3, the default riders, 4, the common sense riders, and 5, the passion riders. Little context, I am envisioning these categories as in a setting like the setting where I'm at, Warsaw, a city that has copious and diverse forms of public transit, and people still often choose to use the car. So these categories of riderships is not envisioned for a community where, for example, there is no public transit. These category systems are envisioned for use in a city that has diverse, frequent service, multiple forms, like Warsaw, which has metro, urban rapid rail, which I'm on right now, trams and buses, and also a lot of people that choose to use their car or walk and cycle. So that is the context, a contemporary city with diverse public transit and a lot of car dependence. So that's what we're talking about here. I hope you enjoy these. If you have anything to share, I don't have comments open, but you're free to email me at info@pedestrianspace.org. Fives, or the passion riders. Yes, I am a 5, waiting for my train. Fives will ride even when it's a little inconvenient. 5s are the ones who, when they travel, see public transit as an attraction. If they're visiting a new city, they'll probably check out the public transit system. 5s might be really into things like timetable details and all that, but 5s might also just be super passionate about the choice and diversity. Gotta go, here comes my train. 5 know about crowding and congestion. They accept the reality of public transit. So for many 5s, this is luxury. I think for messaging for 5s, I think that unlike some of the other categories, particularly 3 and 4, I don't think gratitude is all that important in messaging, although it's super nice, of course. I think everybody who rides public transit having some messaging and marketing that thanks them for riding is great. I think 5s, they're the ones who are going to really notice small details. If you have screens on board, I think they're the ones who are really paying attention to a lot of programming. They might be really ones also paying attention to how well kept things are, to small changes. I think 5s generally they're just so passionate about having quality public transit. I think they like facts too. I think they like understanding what is the vision of the public transit from the municipal perspective, what changes are coming. I mean, these are the passion riders. They're crazy about the experience. They might even choose, some of them, their community where they live based on the quality of public transit if they can. These are the guys that will be sitting at the party talking to you about public transit at 11 p.m., whether you want to talk about it or not. I am a 5. Hello, all my 5s. I like to celebrate 5s because they are the advocates for public transit. They are the ones who also, I believe, will be using public transit even if it's a little bit inconvenient. They're just really into having the ridership experience and about being able to choose that. I also think a lot of 5s in the summer are actually not using public transit in places where there are winter and autumn conditions. I do know actually that a lot of 5s in the summer and warmer months they are going more frequently by foot and cycling because they are oftentimes huge lovers of cycling and moving by foot as well. They are all around advocates for soft mobility, sustainable mobility. I'm going to think more about messaging for 5s. Interestingly, it's a challenge for me. I think 5s are the ones who are actually going to notice messaging for all the other categories. Maybe then some of the other categories do notice them themselves. I think fives are going to notice the specific messaging towards the ones, the non-users, for the twos, the skeptics, for the threes, the defaults, for the fours, the common sense writers. I think the fives are going to be the ones who notice overall public transit campaigns, notice the details of them, the different storylines, and the different messagings. So I do think that's what's interesting about fives, because they're dialed into the sustainable mobility shift. They're the ones who are the most interested. So they're the ones who are going to be probably noticing the public transit campaigns overall more. Okay, I've been thinking about what I recorded just earlier today about fives and messaging, and rather than re-record everything, I think I'm just gonna bundle this all up and publish it and say I've been thinking that I was totally wrong, actually. That I think I said that five, messaging with gratitude, I think I said it wasn't really that important for five, and I think I'm totally wrong. I think it's really important for all writers to have messaging with gratitude, and I think fives really having appreciative messaging, marketing and campaigns that thanks fives, that celebrates them, is really, really wonderful, and also can influence other categories. A celebratory messaging, celebratory campaigns that celebrate all writers, I think is really important. And also, I think fives will especially appreciate a little bit of fun laced in there. Obviously, all categories can, all people can, but I think fives in particular can really be impacted by having some really fun messaging and campaigns around celebrating public transit ridership. Okay, fours, the common sense writers. These folks are not wild about commuting by public transit like the fives, the passion writers. And also, they're not skeptical like the twos and the ones. They are the common sense writers. They're the ones that are making their commuting choices to ride public transit based on real common sense factors. Parking's expensive. It makes more sense to ride on public transit. These people know the benefits of maybe a few extra minutes spent using public transit versus all the hassles of using their car. They really make their decisions based on common sense. And I think in terms of messaging, they're one of the most interesting groups. I'm sure there's some really great studies done on this, but my guess, and I can't wait to dig into some literature and papers to find out what many prior studies on public transit ridership categories have discovered and shared, but my guess is that the fours, the common sense riders, are one of the categories with the greatest potential for modal shift. Many of them might have a car at home, but a new urban rapid rail was connected to their neighborhood, and they took a ride and found out it was really convenient and really practical. By the way, here I am on urban rapid rail in Warsaw on a Sunday afternoon, just got my ticket. I'm these days mostly in my neighborhood, so I don't use a monthly pass, but I generally have a monthly pass myself. But the common sense writer, I think, appreciates also diversity of choice, quality service. This is what keeps them. And I think messaging that is full of quality information that ensures quality, effective public transportation is really effective for all groups, but in particular fours, the common sense writers. 3, the default writers. I see you, default writers. Threes are default writers. They're not like passion writers. They're not like all about the ride. They really don't care. It's a means of transit. Public transit is the way they get around, either for lack of other choices. Default riders, a lot of them probably would choose a car if they could afford to or had the means. Threes should provide two things. One is education about why riding public transit is in fact an incredible choice for the environment and for society. Default, yeah, maybe they're not riding transit out of choice, but I think it is important to wrap into the messaging and into the media why riding public transit is a benefit for the environment, for society. Weave in a little bit about this thing called the sustainable mobility shift, which many people who are just interested in commuting and going about their daily business, they're not like many of us who are researching or working with mobility, thinking about these things constantly, recording videos on a Sunday morning about public transit ridership categories. I also think messaging with threes in mind should include some gratitude. Also, thank you for riding. We really appreciate it. Okay, so the twos, the skeptics. I see you twos. The twos, yeah, they're the skeptics, and they might have ridden before. They might have great public transit options all throughout their neighborhood. Remember, the context for my categorizing systems is for a dynamic city with a lot of options. So I'm not thinking of skeptics as people who are car dependent in a community that has no other options. As we all know, what do you expect? If people don't have any other options other than the car, they're going to choose the car. So we're talking about cities where diverse options exist. The twos have options. They have access to public transit, but they're skeptical. So there's reasons there. I like to think of those reasons and unpack what it's all about. Is it a stigma? Is it a bad experience from childhood? Is it just a bias about public transit being for a certain type of person? Or they think it's, dirty or smelly. Oftentimes stigmas that don't match the reality. So once these people actually get on board and have experiences, sometimes their mind can really be shifted. And for me, that's a big thing with twos, the skeptics, that I do believe they often simply lack experience and exposure. The fact that we have a category for twos, the skeptics, and these guys are not ones. They're not non-users. They are not users who are firm in never ever wanting to use public transit. They're skeptical. That means there's room for change, which for me is super exciting. So for me, the skeptics are actually a really exciting group because there's that little smidgen of curiosity, right? Even the skepticism itself indicates they're not hardlining and saying we're never using it. They're exhibiting some level of curiosity, but a great deal of hesitance. And so we need to find out ways to stimulate their curiosity and work with their curiosity. I think skeptics just need to be given a chance to experience public transit more and given more encouragement. Okay, ones, the non-riders. I'll be honest, ones, I've got you on my mind a lot. In fact, you're one of the categories I want to have much more interaction with, because if we're talking about the sustainable mobility shift, which I am, and you might not be thinking about that, but it's a part of my work, it's a part of my inspiration, it's a huge part of why I do what I do, and I want to be talking with you guys, those of you who are choosing to be driving most of the time, if not all of the time, and totally disinterested in change. I know you're not going to be shamed into making a different choice for your transit. However, I also know change is possible, and that for some of you, there is room for conversation. And I genuinely want to know too, what if we came to the table together, obviously not for any type of debate necessarily, but for a constructive dialogue on why you are not interested in making that change and potentially shifting up your commute a little bit. Really putting those thoughts on the table of what is the barrier, whether psychologically, structurally, so forth. I was at a public transit conference this past week, and one of the panelists on a talk mentioned that they had done a survey, and that about 30% of the people who respond to the survey said they're never they're never making the change to public transit. They are never leaving their car. This is a hard number, and that's a tough, you guys are tough nuts to crack, I'll be honest. And guess what? I was car dependent for many years of my life. I am not preaching over here without having any concept of all the different things I'm talking about. I grew up totally car dependent. My first car keys, the day I turned 16, new car and everything. I know about it. I know what I'm talking about when I talk about car dependence. I know the life. I've even had car dependent adult chapters of my life. But I think as a person who knows that life and who also knows the public transit life, who knows the walkability life and so forth, I like to come into settings with those different prisms of awareness to be able to share, because sometimes when we're so hard on one route, it might be that we even lack information or experience about what it could be like. So, once I am very interested in you, part of my future focus with my work is workshops that are almost entirely created for once, almost entirely created for people who are essentially non-riders, who basically never buy tickets to ride. I want to know what's going on. So, if you have thoughts, any ideas to share, this is just the beginning. I've just been tinkering with this 5 categories of ridership intervals in my mind, and plan on doing a lot more with it. I'm really excited also to start digging into literature and there's many existing category systems like this. I think I just want to have a little bit of fun and play around with my own mind and my own system of observing these different categories before really diving in and seeing what's out there. But I'm really excited to dive in. If you have references or ideas, or you're working with similar things, feel free to contact me, info@pedestrianspace.org. In terms of messaging for ones, I think this is another one that's really interesting for me. I'm going to be giving a lot more time to messaging for both 5s and 1s, in fact. Opposite ends of the spectrum. I consider myself a 5. And when I sat down to think about messaging for 5s, I actually was a tiny bit stumped, which really surprised me. And with 1s, 1s are the ones who are explicitly and staunchly stating they are never going to ride. They are stubborn as heck. Not interested, not doing it. How do you message for a group of people who is flat out disinterested? I know there are ways, and as somebody interested in marketing for mobility and interested in visual messaging and interested in psychology of mobility choice, I'm going to be spending a lot of time with this. Part of me feels like messaging for ones, the non-riders, needs to be clever. But then another part of me thinks, you know what, it gets tiresome with always needing to be so clever and innovative. Sometimes we need to really just get back to basics and simple messaging. So maybe testing out a mix of both. Some curious, eye-catching, out-of-the-box clever marketing for the ones. Also bound up with some really simple, down-to-earth messaging that cuts right to the point.